This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by Squarespace. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. To take 10% off your first purchase, visit squarespace.com and use the offer code MacVoices10. That's MacVoices10. Welcome to Mac Notables on Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been way too long since we talked to Ted Landau. We knew that he was going to be traveling hither and yon, and he is back from both of those to give us his thoughts on everything that we've missed talking about. Ted, it's great to have you back. I'm glad the travels went well.
Thank you. As always, it's great to be back. It's fun talking to you.
Yeah, and it's fun to get your reaction from your vaunted position on Olympus.
I see. Well, I don't think I actually live there, but I occasionally visit.
All right. Well, then, from the Bay Area, how's that?
Okay, that's good.
Close enough. Close enough.
Mm-hmm.
Ted, there's so many things that have happened really since you left. I thought I'd toss out a couple, and if they are worthy of your attention or judgment, great, and if not, we'll pass on them. But the first thing, of course, is the iPhone. We had laughed about, the iPhone would probably be around by the time you got back. Well, it is. We both have our hands on an iPhone 5S. I'm curious to see what your reaction is to it, and also your reaction with using iOS 7 on a day-to-day basis.
Very, very positive, I guess would be the bottom line. Let's start with iOS 7. I had a few hesitations with it from working with beta copies and reading articles about it. And the main ones involved the interface. I wasn't always thrilled with the flat interface and how it changed things from buttons to just text. And some of the icons look so simplified from the older icons that it almost looked like going back in time, we lost our graphics power. This is the best we can do. Sorry, those nice icons with 3D depth and that you had before. Well, now it's just going to be a red icon with a white spot in the middle. So that sort of stuff disturbed me, and I was a little worried about it. And some of it, to be honest, I still don't like, but I've gotten used to it as I've started to use it, and it's been overwhelmed by all the stuff that I do like. I love the new version of Safari with the improved way of looking at the tabs and better navigation, and I also like the control panel or control center that pops up from the bottom of the screen. I find very convenient now for doing things like going to airplane mode or turning Wi-Fi only on or off. Or I like the fact that you can now search by just dragging down from the top of the screen area. Once I learned exactly where I was supposed to drag, it's pretty much anywhere except the very top, because that brings down the notification center. That's a big convenience. It was always a hassle to have to press the home button to go back to the first screen and then go back one more time to get to the search screen. This is great. And I've also been having a lot of fun with Siri. I've never been someone who has gotten used to the idea of using Siri for a number of reasons, and one is I'm at home a lot, and I suppose I could use it at home, but a lot of times when I'm in a public environment, I don't want to be shouting things into Siri, either because they won't hear it over the noise, or because I don't want other people to hear what I'm saying, or just because I'm just finicky that way. And so I lots of times I wind up typing things even if they're not necessary, and I'm trying to force myself not to do that. And so I started doing things like asking, what's the score on the Oakland A's Tigers game or something like that, or when's the next showing of this movie at this theater, or remind me to do this when I get home. Some of them I could have done in iOS 6. Some of them were new things that were added for iOS 7, and it all just seems to work better than it did in iOS 6. The percentage of time that I actually get something that I was hoping to see as an answer seems to have gone up. So they seem to have really improved it. And I'm sure there are other things. Those are some ones that occur to me right off the bat. Everything seems to function more smoothly. It seems like a significantly more polished OS once I get past some of those interface glitches. And as for the iPhone itself, the fingerprint stuff is fun and inconvenient. I use it all the time as a means to unlock my screen, and it's very nice. It works perfectly every time I've tried it. I mean, every once in a while I'll say try again, but 99% of the time it just works fine. and the camera, the other big new thing, some of the new features, like the slow-mo feature I experimented with, it worked exactly like Apple said. The new interface I like better. That's another area where I like what iOS 7 is, where you can. I like the way they redesigned the camera navigation. The quality of the camera. It's not. I've seen where the double flash goes into effect on sometimes, particularly in low light situations. It hasn't always been successful in making the picture better, as far as I'm concerned. One time it gave it a really washed out look that I didn't like at all. But by and large, it took great pictures before. It's still taking great pictures, and everything does seem to be a little snappier in terms of the speed. So overall, it's just, I was very happy with my iPhone 5. I can't say I could be running iOS 7 on my iPhone 5 and get almost all the same benefits. So I wouldn't say that there's an overwhelming reason for someone who's happy with an iPhone 5 to rush out and get an iPhone 5S instead, just so they can have the new features. But the new features are fun and worth it. And if you're in the market for a new iPhone anyway, I'd go for it.
I was really concerned when they announced the fingerprint scanner. That just seemed like something that I've never seen work reliably, and it was going to be a real disaster if it didn't work. And I'm like you, I have trouble getting it not to work. In fact, there are times it opens my phone so quickly, I'm not sure that I ever locked it up. So it feels like a nice solid update. Maybe not a lot of flash, but a great update. Your comments about iOS 7 are interesting to me, that you did not like, or maybe still don't like, some of the interface elements. I still feel like from a readability standpoint, there are times that, and there was an article on the Mac Observer today as we record this about maybe improving some of the readability and visibility. But overall, I can't say that it's like, oh my God, I can't see anything, or I wish it was different. Different in a major way. It's different than it was before, but it's just different. It's not better or worse.
Yeah, it's different, and like I said, I'm getting used to it. And there's some times that I actually like the new design better, the more wall-to-wall design, so to speak, where there's less elements that get cut off before the end of the screen. Often I like that approach better. So yeah, it's fine. I mean, I'm not going to make a big deal of it, and I'm certainly not one of those people that are motion sensitive that have been complaining that they, are throwing up every time they look at the screen. Not that that's funny if they do that, but the idea that you throw up when you look at the screen seems a little humorous to me. But yeah, I mean, it's good. And getting back to the thumbprint or fingerprint technology, one thing, before I started working with it, I was a little bit unclear as to how it worked. And I thought my first thought before I delved into it and saw how it did work, was that a thumbprint or a fingerprint was going to be required to open up the iPhone. And then I started thinking, well, how's that going to work? What happens if you sell the iPhone and forget to undo that? And then the new person calls up and says, I can't open the iPhone until I have your fingerprint. You have to drive over here or something so I can reset it. And it became clear once I started working with it, it wasn't like that at all, that you could still use the passcode to open the iPhone. And then, of course, it occurred to me, well, then the fingerprint technology does not provide any added security at all. It's really not it's not really accurate, in my view, to describe it as a security feature, because there's nothing that the fingerprint technology does that prevents someone from getting into your iPhone that they couldn't do in an iPhone. I mean, that prevents them from getting into your iPhone in a way that makes it better than what they, would have access to from an older iPhone. All it does is make it more convenient for you to do it, so you don't have to remember a password and you don't have to type a password. You can just use your fingerprint. So I'm not sure that that's clear to other people either. I think there's a tendency to think, oh wow, this is some modern new high-tech thing. It's going to be like in the movies where they have to put their hand on a wall device before the door opens or something like that, and there's no way around that, or a retina scan or something like that. It's really not like that.
Convenience versus security, I think, is an interesting point, and I agree with you. I think it does open the door for us to use maybe stronger passwords since it is convenient for me as the owner of my phone to get in. But beyond that, and there have been so many articles and things about the ways around it, the ways to crack it or hack it, and so if anybody is really planning on keeping the formula for Coca-Cola in there, don't count on that. But
yeah, the stuff about how to get around it or crack it always drives me up a wall. I mean, because it's so ridiculous. I mean, yes, even if it's one thing to say it's possible, but when then you read about what you have to do to actually do it, you realize that 99% of the criminals who would steal your iPhone would have no idea how to do that. And virtually 100% of the people that would normally interact with their iPhone would have no idea how to do it, nor would they want to. I mean, and if someone actually gets physical possession of your iPhone, that's going to be a problem in any case. I just don't think that most people were ever. I'm waiting. How many people? I mean, would you predict over the next year, for instance, will have their iPhone 5S compromised out there in the real world, not in some test situation, because of the ability of the things that have been described? I would guess close to zero, and that's why I think it's ridiculous.
And even if that number is a little bit higher than that, let's not forget the fact that this just makes it more difficult to get into. So theoretically, that gives you more time to go to Find My iPhone and erase your phone if you're really worried about the data on there. I wouldn't be anxious to do that, but if that's what if it's a choice between my data being compromised or me getting my phone back, I know which one I'd choose.
Well, though that a little bit gets back to what I was saying before, I don't really think it makes it any more difficult to break into your iPhone, because if they can, for instance, if I can guess your passcode because I know you so well, and I just look at you, and like the movie Now You See Me. I don't know if you've seen it, but where there's a guy in the movie who could just sight read you and figure out things just by your facial expressions and how you answered questions. And I mean, if I can figure out your passcode, then I could break into your 5S. Or I could break into your 5 just as easily. It wouldn't make any difference. I mean, the fact that there's a fingerprint technology is totally irrelevant to how easy it is for me to use a passcode to break into your iPhone.
Okay. I haven't seen the movie. So.
Well, the movie doesn't matter for answering that question. But I mean, the point is that if I knew your passcode was 1111, I could break into your iPhone 5 that way. I could break into your iPhone 5S that way. The fact that you have fingerprint technology on your iPhone 5S is irrelevant.
Okay. Point taken. Point taken. I don't know. I can't say that it's one of those, oh my God, you just have to go out and get this. But on the other hand, it feels like a solid update. I'm very happy to have it.
Oh, it's a great update. Yeah, it is. It makes more of a difference to how you use your iPhone on a day-to-day basis than any update that has come out since the original iPhone.
How about we swing to the other end of the spectrum, Ted, the 5C? Any thoughts on that as a device itself, or who it's supposed to be appealing to? There were some discussions, I think, over the weekend about some of the large retailers giving rebates on this as a sign that, oh my God, it may not be selling as well as expected.
I didn't take it that way. I suppose it could be. There's been all sorts of speculation. There was speculation that the sales numbers for the iPhone, because they weren't broken out between 5S and 5C, were because they wanted to hide that the 5C wasn't doing all that well. Some people are always looking for a negative slant on things. Rather than focusing on the fact that they sold 9 million iPhones in the opening weekend, which more than doubled their previous record, as I recall, let's see if we can find something bad that we can say about, the 5C isn't doing all that well. So I don't know how well the 5C is doing, and I didn't take the fact that they were lowering the prices as a means. I don't think Best Buy is that interested in pumping up sales of the 5C that's why they would do it. Apple might be interested, but I don't think this was an Apple supported thing. This was I think it was a competitive thing. I think they had my interpretation, which may be wrong, was that they had a potentially hot item, and they wanted to make sure that when you want to get your 5C, you got it from them and not from the other store. Best Buy didn't want you to get it from Walgreens or the Apple store. So they said, well, if we sell it for half the price, then that'll be a reason to get it from us. And so somebody, and of course the inevitable, once somebody does it, everybody else starts doing it. It's like the gas stations where there are 4 gas stations on 4 corners of the same street, and one of them drops their price by 2 cents, and the others all have to drop their price by 2 cents, or that person will get all the business. So that's sort of what happened, and I think it's a good thing. I think in any case, I think it's actually in the spirit of what Apple intended, which was that the iPhone will be a lower cost device that can attract people that might not want to pay the money for the bigger iPhone. And Apple isn't losing a penny, as far as I can tell, from the fact that Best Buy is offering a gift card to knock the price down. Apple is getting their same cut as if Best Buy didn't do that. Best Buy is the one that's taking the hit on it. And so I think it's a win-win for everybody. The customer gets a cheaper iPhone, Apple gets the same amount of money, maybe even more if they sell more iPhones, and Best Buy presumably is happy with the arrangement as well, or they wouldn't do it. I think it's over today anyway, so it was just a temporary thing, which they might do it again.
And to me, the great thing about it is, from Apple's perspective, it wasn't a race to the bottom. We didn't see a cheap iPhone that's supposed to appeal to everybody. They left the 4S in the mix for those carriers who wanted to offer a free phone. Perfectly fine iPhone. Very nice device. For people that wanted something a little bit better, a little bit higher, a little bit more of a fashion statement, yeah, they're the colored iPhone 5Cs. And then for the people that want, I guess you would call it a serious iPhone, you got the 5S.
Yeah, well, two things. First, I'm glad they're now where the 4S is the cheapest one, because when I've had friends that wanted to buy a new iPhone and were considering getting the previous year's model, this is before the 5S and 5C came out, the biggest dividing line from almost everybody that I spoke to was Siri, interestingly enough. Almost everyone I spoke to said, I want to make sure I get an iPhone that I can talk to. So the fact that the 4S now is that's the first time that a free phone has been offered that has Siri built into it. So I think that actually is kind of nice too. In terms of the 5C itself and how I see it, I think it's a good marketing move for Apple. And by the way, I might add that for people who want to bump up from the 4S to the 5C, they get a larger screen. Even if they didn't get anything else, that's a significant benefit all by itself. So something to consider. And I see it as marketing in three ways. Number one, it's new. I think there's something attractive to potential buyers about saying you're getting the latest, newest iPhone, as opposed to you're getting last year's model, even if the relative differences between those two statements is trivial. And so I think being able to say that is new and different, or at least new and supposedly different, will drive sales. So that's one thing. Second thing, I think, is the colors. I think the design and colors are designed to appeal, I don't know, to more youthful. I don't know what adjective you want to put in there, but it's designed to appeal to an audience that the basic iPhone might not appeal to as much. Now, some of that could be covered up by buying a bright yellow case for a traditional-looking iPhone, but I think there's something nice about having the colors to offer. Apple has been into this colors for marketing for a long time. I mean, we can remember all the way back to the iMac. First, it was one-color iMac, then there were five-color iMacs. First, it was just one-color iPod, then there were 5 colors of iPods. I mean, this isn't a new step for Apple. Apple apparently has had success with the idea of multiple colors being a good marketing strategy, and they're going to that well again, and probably with success. And number 3 is the fact that it allows them, for the first time, to have a low-cost iPhone that has exactly the features that they want. Because up until now, the low-cost iPhone was last year's model, and they were locked in to whatever last year's model was. And so, for instance, to give you one trivial type example, when they shifted to the new Lightning connector, they were in a position where the current iPhone had the new Lightning connector, but last year's model had the old connector. And there was nothing that they were going to do about that. Now, if they were in a position, if back then when they shifted to the Lightning connector, they were in this iPhone 5S, 5C type of mode, they could introduce the iPhone 5C, and now even the lower cost one would have the Lightning connector. And so it allows them to have that sort of flexibility that they didn't have before. And I think that will make the lower cost phone more attractive on that level as well. So I think in all 3 of those ways, it makes it a good marketing move for Apple, and I expect the 5Cs will be a success.
we can't leave this discussion without just asking you to comment on the color controversy. And you've already said about the 5C colors, but what color iPhone 5S did you get?
Oh, I belabored this. Well, here's the deal. I have to go back in time a little bit. I, of course, had a black iPhone at first because that was the only color you could get. And I persisted with the black, even when white became an option. And I persisted with it for a couple of reasons. I feel like I'm listing reasons here again, but I persisted with it partially because I like the black look. It seemed more serious, and I'm a serious sort of guy. I liked actually the fact that when you turned off the screen, the entire front of it was black. You almost couldn't see the dividing line between the screen and the rim around it because everything was black, which I thought, for some reason, I found that idea appealing. And everything I owned, except for some silver things that were like the Mac keyboard or something like that. All my printers were black. All my stereo components were black. Black seemed to be the color that matched most of what I had. Nothing that was white. I mean, I think my Airport Extreme, that's it. My Airport Extreme is still white. I think they still are white. I don't think they make them in any other color. And that's the only thing I own that's, in terms of technology, like TVs or computers, that's white. It's all silver and black. And so, yeah, the white had the silver part of it, but the white is what dominated when you looked at it. So I stuck with black. And then finally last year for the iPhone 5, my iPhone 5, I decided, I've been seeing white. White dominates in the advertisements. I've gotten more used to it. And I sort of like the more cheerful, if anything, look of the white. And so I shifted to white. And so this year, then and I was very happy I shifted to white last year because a lot of those, the black one had a lot of problems with easily scratching from people I spoke to. Dan Frakes, my friend at Macworld, told me he got a black one and was scratched like from day one. He was unhappy with it. So so I was pretty much convinced when I got my new iPhone I was going to stick with white. I had been happy with it for the past year. The iPhone 5S was going to be white. And then when they introduced the gold color as a possibility, which we knew about months in advance, I looked at the gold and I said, even if it's an attractive gold, no, that's not me. I don't want gold. And I'm pretty much solid. The only appeal to gold was newness. That it would clearly, if I was into status, it would clearly mark it as an iPhone 5S instead of a 5, and that didn't matter to me much. And what I wasn't expecting was that they were going to totally change the black one to this space gray, whatever space means. I tweeted the other day that space is black as far as I'm concerned. I don't know where in outer space that gray color exists, but apparently Apple thinks it does. But in any case, it's called space gray, and it actually looked kind of cool. And so I spent a lot of time trying to decide, do I want the white one? Do I want the gray one? And ultimately, I just stuck with the white one. I think I would have been happy with either one.
So you mean the silvery finish?
Yes, the white was silver.
White was silver.
So
okay.
white was as opposed to white with gold. I was never going to get a gold one. That wasn't an option.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by before and since with the furor over the gold iPhones. But I tweeted the other day. I was sitting at a stoplight, looked over, and the girl in the car beside me. I think you even responded to this.
Yes.
She had this. The gaudy, it has to be the gaudiest iPhone case I've ever seen. It was like a leopard print in shiny gold with pearls dangling from it on little chains. It's like, really? So I guess there is something to the fact that some people really do accessorize and identify with the colors or the style of their iPhone case. I'm like you. I'm a bit more pragmatic.
Well, what color did you get?
I got space gray.
Space gray.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I like, if I'm looking at the phone, I like sort of like the bezel on a TV. I don't want a silver bezel or a white bezel. I want a black bezel, so it's not impinging upon the image. But that's me.
Yeah, well, I understand that. I think there is. I can't describe it verbally right now, but there is an aspect to the white one that I find helps in that regard in a different way. I just can't tell you what the way is right now, but I think it's just a personal preference. Yeah. But there are people, based on the Twitter feed, you've probably seen the same tweets. There are a lot of people that we both know that got the gold iPhone. So it's not as if it's a pariah, and I think it's probably doing quite well.
Oh, the lines I was in, they were they were disappointed that they weren't going to be able to get a gold iPhone. But what always intrigues me is if you really want it that bad, then walk away. Go to another store or wait, even a few days, arguably, where you have a chance at least of getting what you're looking for. But instead, 4 a.m, they're there, and I can't get gold. Oh, okay, well, I guess I'll take a space gray.
Well, if it doesn't really matter to them that much, then I can understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, like if I couldn't get a white one, I'd probably have just gotten a space gray one because I was on the fence to begin with, and I would say, okay, that decides it. I'll get the space gray one. Yeah. But what I don't understand is when people really make dramatic decisions like that. I saw someone tweet the other day that they were looking forward to the new iPads coming out because the one they have now is only 16 gigabytes and it's never been adequate from day one. And why do they only have 16 gigabytes? Because that was all they had left on opening day when he waited in line for 2 hours to get one. By the time he got to the front of the line, the larger ones were out. And so I'm thinking, God, if that had happened to me, I'm not going to spend $500, $600, whatever it was, $700 in some cases on a new iPad and not get the one I want. No, they'll just say, okay, no thanks. I can wait another couple of weeks and get the one I want.
Exactly. I agree.
But anyway.
Well, speaking of new iPads, that's the other thing. It looks like there's going to be an Apple iPad event on October 22nd. We tend to stay away from rumors, Ted, but what do you think we need in a new iPad other than maybe the obvious, the Lightning connector?
Well, there's a Lightning connector in the new iPad, in the current generation.
In the 4, yes. And in the Mini, yeah, okay, you're right.
Yeah, there is a Lightning connector there already.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about the 4.
Yeah, that sort of half-year iPad that came out last fall.
Yeah. Whose only feature did seem to be the Lightning connector.
Well, that was the only reason for it, yeah. And probably to reset the clock because the iPads have been coming out in the spring, and they came out with that one in the fall, and now looks like they're going to come out on the fall for the foreseeable future. It looks to me like Apple has set to come out with the idea that the new iPhones and new iPads will come out in time for holiday shopping rather than at some extraneous time of the year, which I think is a good idea. Again, in terms of what they're going to have that's new, they're going to have a slightly new shape, according to all the predictions I've read, and I think that's likely to be true. There's increasing evidence that they might have fingerprint technology, just like the iPhone 5S does, which I would welcome because I can't tell you how many times I press the home button on my iPad expecting it to unlock and having it not do so. What the heck's going on here? So I've very quickly gotten dependent on that, and it would be nice to have an iPad that worked that way. In terms of what others, it'll probably have the better processor that's in the iPhone. It'll probably have some of the same advantages that were announced for the iPhone. Is there going to be something new beyond that in the iPad that we haven't heard about at all that isn't in the iPhone? Beats me. I have no idea. I would guess probably not. I think is a bit of a problem, actually, in the sense that I'm not sure what they can do, that will make it seem not a kind of a disappointing isn't the right word that people often use it, but not very exciting announcement. I can't. That will they'll get. I here's to put it another way. I have an iPhone. I have an iPad. That is like you. It's the last generation, the iPad 3, I guess it is, the last generation that still has the old type of connector. I didn't upgrade just to get the Lightning connector. And I'm very happy with it. I use it all the time. Now, again, I'm in a position where I have sufficient money and sufficient motivation as someone who writes about these products to potentially buy something that I don't really need just so that I can have it to write about it. But that aside, if I was a typical user, if I was somebody who just was using it for my own personal use and never intended to write an article about it or make any money off of it or anything like that, and maybe I was on a budget and needed to consider how much I want to spend, I can't imagine that I would get a new iPad just so that I could get a different connector and a fingerprint technology. That wouldn't be enough for me to do it. iPhones are different because they're subsidized. A lot of people will get a new iPhone every 2 years, whether they need it or not. just because the price is so cheap. But to get a new iPad every 2 years, especially if you get the one that has a cellular connection, which adds another $130 to the cost, you're talking about spending another $700-800 in that range every couple of years, or even every year if you really wanted to upgrade. So I don't see. I'd be surprised if a new iPad comes out that suddenly generates a lot of people saying that my old iPad isn't worth it anymore. I think the bigger driver, and something that's of interest to me, is the iPad Mini. I've been happy with the iPad. I've been tempted to switch to an iPad Mini. I'm not sure, which one I would ultimately prefer. And I could see if new iPads come out, that this would be an opportunity for me to get an iPad Mini and experiment ultimately with which one I like better. Again, that's part of the luxury that I can do because I can afford to do that. And if the iPad Mini came out with a Retina display, it'd be a no-brainer for me. I'd be in line that day to get that. But regardless of what other new features it had. But that aside, I'm not quite sure what the deal is. It will also be interesting to see if the fingerprint technology comes out. Will it be in the iPad Mini too, or will it just be in the larger iPad? I suspect it'll just be in the larger iPad.
I've gone around and around on this. It seems the Lightning connector, like you say, is part of the iPad 4 and the Mini, so that's not going to be it. There have been all kind of debates as to whether Apple can realistically produce a Retina screen for the iPad Mini, which I can't believe others can do it and they can't. And that's certainly a place where people look at the Nexus and say, well, that's a better screen. So I keep wondering, is this going to be a double iPad event, meaning the full size and the Mini? And what else can they do with that? They can put the M7 chip in to give some of those benefits. They can put the new A7 chip in to speed it up. But yeah, it's an iPad. So so they increase the quality of the camera too. Let's just say they do everything they did to the iPhone 5S. Is that enough? I don't know.
Well, it's enough to keep the iPad popular, that's for sure. I don't think it's enough to get a lot of people who are happy with their iPad to trade it in for a new one. The iPad, and to some extent, as I said, it's more of a problem for iPads and iPhones. I think both products are approaching a sort of stability phase where the amount of change from year to year is going to be less dramatic than it has been. Computers have already reached that years ago. And I think that is a more, on the one hand, I think that's more of a problem for iPads and iPhones because, like I said, the subsidized price of iPhones generates sales, even if the products aren't all that different. On the other hand, the iPad, I still think, is in the tablet. It is. I still think the iPad is in the tablet market, and that market isn't as saturated yet as the phone market. And so I think there's more room for growth. And so keeping the iPad fresh and coming up with at least some new features will help keep the iPad in front of people's eyes and help generate sales. And I really will be disappointed if the iPad Mini isn't Retina display. Like you say, I mean, they have Retina displays essentially in smaller tablets from other companies, and it's hard to believe that that Apple, the biggest company on earth, can't at least match what some of the other companies are doing. Especially when Apple doesn't even cut the price. Apple will sell the iPad for more than those other companies are selling their similar tablets. So there's even more room for Apple to be able to do it. There might be some production hang-up that has nothing to do with cost that will delay it, but otherwise I just can't see it.
We'll know on October 22nd.
Apparently so. I thought it was going to be October 15th based on rumors I had read in September, but October 22nd seems to be the day, and I think that's a good choice. It was enough time after the iPhone announcement to be just about right.
This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase, go to squarespace.com and use the discount code MacVoices10. That's MacVoices10. I'm usually talking to you about how easy Squarespace is to use, how you can start with one of their beautiful templates, Customize it through simple drag this, click that, and have a site that is uniquely yours. How easy it is to upload graphics and let Squarespace do the heavy lifting of resizing them, or how connecting your social network presences to your site is a breeze. I might even mention to you how Squarespace automatically delivers your site to any device, desktop, iPhone, iPad, and beyond, so that everything looks great no matter what size the screen. This time I'm not going to mention any of that. Okay, I guess I just did. Oh well. This time, I want to talk to the folks out there who want to get under the hood and add things that aren't always easy to put on a website. The kind of things where code might be involved. I know. That's not you, right? Well, it could be. There might come a time when you want or need to do just that, and you're wondering if Squarespace might be too simple, so simple that you're blocked from tweaking things. I'm here to tell you that isn't the case. If you want to, you can easily use embed code from audio and video sharing sites, markup, HTML, JavaScript, even dig around in CSS if you want to. All with just a couple extra clicks. Now, if that sounded like alphabet soup to you, that's just fine, because you never have to go there, but you can if you want to. And that's just another amazing aspect of Squarespace, that your website can be as simple or as complex as you wish, and it will all turn out looking just great with all the fantastic Squarespace features included. But don't believe me, even though I'm trustworthy. Sign up for Squarespace's 14-day free trial. You don't even need a credit card. And this is no limited function kind of trial. You get full access to the power of Squarespace, on top of and under the hood. Do your worst, or your best, and when you're convinced that everything I've said is true, use the offer code MacVoices10, that's MacVoices10, to get 10% off your first purchase. You're going to love Squarespace, no matter what level of user you are. And when you do, let me know what you built with Squarespace in an email to chuck@macvoices.com. Squarespace, everything you need to create an exceptional website. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this edition of Mac Voices. Little surprising that it's before the earnings call, though, which I think is October 28th.
I don't know. I'm not sure. My guess is that wasn't much of a consideration. That the earnings call is when it is, pretty much every. I mean, I guess they could have tried to adjust it so one came before the other, because the earnings call doesn't have to be on that particular date; it just has to be around that time. But they wanted the iPad out in October. That seemed to be evident. The iPad announcement anyway in October. That seemed to be evident for months. So there wasn't a lot of wriggle room. It's just the way it worked out this year.
I'm really tempted to throw trick or treat in here somewhere, but no, I'm not going to.
Right.
Not going to. Let's do a lightning round of different things. RIM, BlackBerry.
Well, I'm not a business expert. I'm not a financial analyst. I don't spend a lot of time trying to read the tea leaves of what's going on with the stock market data and so on. So I don't feel in any way an expert opinion. I just have my gut reactions to those things based on what I've seen happen in the past historically. And what I see based on what I know from history is that they're dead. I'd be surprised if they're still in business 2 years from now.
Yeah, it really is almost a shame. But some of the reactions they had to the way that what we now call smartphones evolved seemed so bizarre and so out of touch. And then the tablets, they completely missed the tablets, which, again, was almost unbelievable. So it's too bad.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't remember it exactly, is don't worry about cannibalizing your successful products, because if you don't, someone else will. And that's failure to follow that advice has led to the downfall of more companies than probably any other single thing, more technology companies anyway, than any other single thing I can imagine.
Okay, on that basis, the Surface, the Microsoft Surface 2.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it. the Surface 2 in particular. Microsoft's a really big company. they're not going to disappear in the next 2 years, and they have the muscle to keep. As was shown in their history, one of the hallmarks of Microsoft is to have failure after failure and keep plugging away and eventually be successful, and be able to do that because they had such a huge market advantage that even their failures are more successful than most other companies' successes. And so to some extent, I think that's the path they're following here with the Surface. It isn't as likely to be as successful as a strategy for the Surface because they are so far behind in the mobile market. It's like they never were able to get the Zune to take off. That ultimately was a disaster for them. And the iPod had such a huge advantage by the time they tried to compete that it was hopeless. And they are rapidly approaching that point, I think, for the Surface as well. I think there was an article I read that said something, put it very well, said something like, not only does Microsoft have to hope that there's room for a third chair at the table, meaning competing with Apple and Google as the other two chairs, but they're going to have to build the chair themselves. That's the position they're in. And so it's tough. Well, it's hard for me to know what's going to happen with that, but I don't expect it to be a gigantic success.
Well, so was the Zune.
Yeah.
I think the key point there is who expects it to be the giant success.
Yeah, Microsoft, perhaps, but not many other people.
Yeah. Microsoft buying Nokia, however you pronounce it, depending on where in the world you are. Good, bad, wasted money, way to prop up Windows Phone?
I have nothing really that I want to add to that. I'm not savvy enough to really know.
Okay. Steve Ballmer retiring from Microsoft.
I think that's a good thing for Microsoft. He hasn't. He's done, in my view, a reasonably good job of managing a very difficult time for Microsoft, but he hasn't done a great job, and he certainly made some mistakes. And I think, in any case, it's a good time for somebody with a fresh attitude to take over at Microsoft.
Have you read anything, any of the pieces about some apparently significant investors in Microsoft wanting Gates to step down?
Yes, they want him to step down as chairman of the board. I have no idea what the significance of that would be. I haven't been following it beyond just what you just said. I don't know why they would want that, but I have not much to add on that.
Yeah, I don't know Microsoft's management structure, but that would take out sort of the two key players that have been Microsoft's history, and so. Does it, could it signal a new era for the company? Could it signal some new thinking in regard to branding everything with the word Windows? I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Well, there might be. Two things. One is I wasn't aware that Gates had that much to do with the day-to-day running of the company anymore. It was almost like, as chairman of the board, he was a figurehead, in my view, more than, it's hard to ever call him a figurehead, but he was so involved in running his foundation and stuff that I never heard of him doing much for the company directly, though I might be wrong about that. But I think there might well be like an insurgency in Microsoft that thinks, that Microsoft is trying to be successful by repeating the same formula that it's been doing for years and is clearly not working, and the people in charge aren't willing to risk a new formula, and so we need to get rid of them and get somebody who is willing to take the risk, because that's clearly what's needed, at least as far as the insurgency is concerned. And maybe getting rid of Gates is just part of that. We'll see. Yeah,
part of me is glad to see it happen, because I think it means Microsoft could produce some interesting products. Another part worries a little bit that they, if they can get someone that can steer them in the right direction, that they could go back to being a real threat. And that's at the risk of sounding like an Apple fanboy. It's just that I'm invested in this technology. It's been very pleasant to see it advance as far as it has, and I would prefer not to see that go away. But Microsoft still, corporate America still loves Microsoft. Mm-hmm. No way around that.
Yeah, and I'm of two minds of that. I mean, I am clearly invested in Apple. It's hard for me to imagine what Microsoft could come out with that would shift that for me, because I have bought nothing but Apple products since 1984, essentially, and I'm not likely to turn that around. That said, not everybody's like me, clearly, and you said you're worried that Microsoft would become a threat. And I'm not worried about Microsoft becoming a threat if by threat it means that they come out with such amazing products that they're clearly superior to what Apple is doing. I mean, if they can do that, more power to them. It's not like I want to see better products. That's partly why I have liked Apple over the years, because in my opinion, they've almost always had the better product. And if Microsoft comes out with something that's twice, 3 times as good as what Apple is doing, then and they are successful because of that, great. It might be bad for me because of my personal investment in Apple, financially and in terms of all the products I own. But for the population at large, I think that would be a good thing. What I would worry about, and what you may have meant more directly, was that they will become a threat because they won't have a better product, but somehow they'll have the marketing and financial muscle to get their product more popular despite it being inferior. And that would be disappointing.
Yeah, and we've talked about it here with a number of people, but right now, Microsoft, their marketing seems to have just been operated by bozos. They just don't seem to, really. I mean, they're clearly running on, or up to this point, have been running on momentum and on their name and on the idea that Microsoft Office is, such a standard. And I mean, the Windows. I know Brian Chaffin was on a little while ago, and the Microsoft Surface ads. I mean, they just.
Yes, I saw him skewered in the Mac Observer. Yeah.
It's just that seems to be the definition of clueless.
Yeah.
Apple TV, or Apple Television, or both.
Apple TV keeps getting better as far as I'm concerned. I'm using mine more and more. Apple has gone on a bonanza in the last few months of adding new channels, but there's probably like at least double, if not more, the number of channels than there was a year ago. And they've added the Disney channels and the ESPN channels and some concert channels, and HBO Go, the most significant new addition, is great to have on the Apple TV. And I use it all the time. I use it for HBO Go. I use it for Netflix. It's, I used to access Netflix from Blu-ray players that had Netflix access built in, and the Apple TV works so much nicer than the Blu-ray players that I've been using that I just have given up on using Blu-ray players altogether. And of course, being able to rent movies from iTunes, having access to my iTunes library, the expanded availability of AirPlay. Just keeps getting better and better, and I'd like to see some. A new model of the Apple TV come out. Actually, one of the things that I talked about in a column a few months ago, I'm just thinking about now that you're asking the column, is when iOS 7 was first announced at the WWDC. I think we can talk about this now. One of the things they showed, and I think they briefly mentioned it at the keynote, so it's public knowledge, was game controllers. And they showed that you could now have a traditional Atari-like game controller that could work with the iPhone. In fact, there are already a couple that are out. Logitech has one I saw, and there's some others that are out. And my reaction was, the Logitech one actually answers one of the questions I have now that I think about it. But one of my reactions was, I'm not sure that I see a game controller that's the size of the iPhone itself as being a popular addition to an iPhone, say. I don't think I'm going to be carrying around a game controller in my pocket for when I want to play an iPhone game that requires the game controller. Though actually, speaking of that, getting sidetracked here, Apple. I saw something that said Apple. Talk about your closed Apple Store again. Apple is prohibiting games that require controllers, unless I misread the statement. So don't quote me on this. People who are listening to this, this is just between you and me.
But I saw some statement to the effect that sounded like they were saying that if your game didn't work with a touchscreen, if the only way the game was going to be played was to use a game controller, Apple wouldn't allow it in the App Store. The game controller had to be an option, not a requirement, in other words. Which is interesting. So, but getting back to the larger issue, I started saying, well, really, what is a game controller? What's the ideal environment for a game controller? Well, to me, the ideal environment for a game controller, possibly an iPad because it's larger, but even more so the Apple TV. Getting back to your question, a game controller attached to an Apple TV working through a large television. Now you have something that's a potential competitor for Xboxes and PlayStations. The only thing that's missing is games. There are no games that run on the Apple TV, and so then I started thinking, well, how do you get games onto Apple TV? Well, the way you would have it is by having an Apple TV Apple Store, just like there's a Mac Store and an iTunes Store for iOS devices. You'd have to open up an App Store that was accessible from Apple TV that could install games right on your device. But then that led to the next issue, which was, well, where do you store them? The Apple TV doesn't have any user accessible storage. So then I started thinking, well, maybe Apple would redesign the Apple TV so that, there's two solutions. One is that all the games would have to be like downloaded as you play them, almost like streaming, which I didn't think would be very practical. And the other possibility is that Apple would in some way enable some limited storage for games to exist on the Apple TV. And so the idea that Apple might expand the Apple TV in that direction, providing an app store, adding some storage capability, is very appealing to me. The other way that I'd like to see it expanded, and this is not something that Apple can do directly, but is just make it a better and better device for breaking the cord, so that someday I can tell Comcast to take a hike. Because Apple TV is completely meeting my needs for what TV I want to watch. That then gets more in the direction of the mythical Apple television device that we keep waiting to occur. So maybe next year.
I hope your comments about, or your line of thinking about the games is not something I've really contemplated a lot. I have to wonder if there would be a way to queue up games. I guess, yeah, that's as good a phrase as any. That, if you've bought games, maybe it stores the most recent 5, or maybe just some key code and streams the rest. I don't know. I know you, though. You're just dying to play Angry Birds at 55 inches, right?
Well, you can almost do that now if I really wanted to, through AirPlay. But it is awkward having a touchscreen device on a television where you're not actually touching the device that you're looking at. This is like playing on a Mac, I guess, and using a trackpad. So not much, which I've never liked, by the way. Playing Angry Birds on a Mac with a trackpad is a distinctly, in my view, inferior experience to playing it on an iPhone or an iPad. And in any case, I've almost stopped playing Angry Birds. The juice has finally run out. To some extent, it's because I think they've ruined the game with all their in-app purchases that they've added and other corny features. They're so interested in making money, as far as I'm concerned, that they've lost sight of what made it a good game. But who am I to say they're making billions of dollars while I'm sitting here talking to you? So,
I'm sorry, Ted. Well, then that begs the question: do you have a new favorite game, or are you just sort of waiting for something to really grab you?
Well, I don't have a favorite game. I've been enjoying letterpress, as we've talked about in some previous times, and I still play letterpress. I don't have any big new favorite game, though. No.
Okay. Well, then we'll wait for your blessing on the next big game.
Okay.
Well, it's good to have you back. We've missed you, and your perspectives are always interesting, and I can't wait, because by the time we get back together, I'm pretty close to it. We should see the iPad announcements and figure out what's going on. So,
yeah. Speaking of new announcements, one more thing I'll add before we close here. And it's appropriate that we're adding it as an afterthought, because it was an afterthought for Apple as well, and that is the new iMacs.
Oh, yeah.
as you know, Apple released updated iMacs, had the Haswell processor, a couple of other minor enhancements. Makes it an overall nicer, faster machine, as far as I can tell. Not only didn't Apple have a media event for it, not only did they have a media event for it, they didn't even announce it on their webpage. There was a PR announcement on their press page that announced it, but you couldn't go to the home page of Apple and see any indication that there were new iMacs. And in fact, I went to the Mac page after I saw that the new iMacs came out to look at what they were saying about new iMacs, and they didn't. While they had updated the iMac page to include the new features that were there, they never said on the iMac page itself that it was a new iMac. The word new never appeared anywhere on the iMac page at all. In other words, if you didn't know, because you read Twitter or the Mac Observer or Macworld or whatever it is that you read that keeps you up to date with Mac news, if you didn't know from independent news that there were new iMacs out, Apple would have given you no clue. You would have never known from going to the Apple site that there were new iMacs out, which I found kind of odd. It was almost as if Apple was going out of their way to keep it a secret, which I don't really understand why they would want to do that. I asked one of the salespeople at the Apple store. Of course, they're not going to tell me, even if they knew, just to see what they would say. And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Yeah, that's Apple. What are you going to do?" But that aside, beyond the mystery of why they want to so underplay it, is the larger message for me is that clearly that represents the state of life now compared to mobile devices. That for Apple, it's mobile, and the iMacs are clearly taking a back seat. It's an interesting thing. I saw that Macworld had a article on the state of the various Apple products, including the iMacs, or the Macs in general, actually. And they noted that how you viewed the Macs depended upon what statistic you were looking at. Amazingly, and I may be a little bit off on the numbers here, but I think I have them about right. Amazingly, the number of Macs sold in a year has tripled in the last decade. I think they sold around 3 million Macs a year in 2003, and they're projected to sell, or last year they sold 18 million? I guess 18 million. So it might even be 6 times, 3 to 18, 6 times, 6 times as many Macs as they had sold a decade ago, if I remember the numbers correctly. In any case, a big increase. However, the percentage of Apple's revenue that is represented by those 18 million Macs is way down. It's something like 14% of the revenue. The rest, almost all the rest of it, going to mobile devices. So when you so on the one hand, the Macs continue to be successful, and I don't imagine that they're going to go anywhere. It's not as if Apple is contemplating getting rid of Macs, and they often play an important component to the whole mobile device, desktop Mac ecosphere. On the other hand, it's clear that Apple isn't going to spend a lot of time, money, or apparently marketing energy letting you know about new developments in the Mac world. The one exception to that apparently being the Mac Pro, which is getting trailers in movie theaters. So clearly they see that as some sort of statement item that they want to make news about. But iMacs apparently, and pretty much MacBooks as well now too, don't get nearly the attention that mobile devices get.
Yeah, the MacBook announcements are the ones that I'm waiting for. And do I expect a media event? Probably not. But I would expect a little more hype because they are mobile devices. But yeah, the desktops are just, I mean, I'm not sure how much more that can be done. You can get faster processors, get more and faster hard drives. But do people really need them?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's an interesting, in line with what you're saying about the laptops. Yeah, not only are the Mac sales a small portion of all of Apple's revenue, but if you break it out from laptops to desktops, the desktops are by far a smaller portion of just the Mac sales. So really, the desktops Macs are really a small thing. And are they headed for extinction, as some people are predicting? I don't know. I don't see it happening in the near future. long term, anything's possible. But 100 years ago, we didn't even have an inkling that computers were ever going to exist. So who's to say what's going to happen in the long term? But in the next few years, I don't see it happening. The tablets still have a long way to go, in my view, before they can replace computers for people who want desktop computers today. There are the people who don't really need a desktop computer. We've talked about this other times. There are the people who a desktop computer is overkill, and if all they want to do is check their Facebook page and check email and surf the web and play a few games, the iPad will do the trick. And if they need to do something else, well, they can upgrade. They can get a keyboard. They can get the iWork apps and so on, and it can be a productivity device to some limited extent. But to me, it is not going to make it for people like me and probably like you who sit in front of a computer a good portion of the day to get work done. And it has a ways to go. And until tablets mature in some way that I can look at a tablet and say, iMac, tablet, tablet's better. Then the iMac's going to stay around. At least I hope so.
I want to add one little piece to this. A friend of mine ordered a 27-inch iMac, his first Mac at home. We talked about the laptops, and he really wanted the 27-inch iMac. So he ordered it like a week before the announcement and was waiting for it to ship. And, of course, then the new iMacs came out. He got an email saying, basically, we've upgraded you to the same level in the new model, which just is... It's so typical Apple. It's the kind of thing you would expect that they would do. If they haven't shipped it, they just shipped the new model. And he was very impressed by that, not to mention the machine itself.
Right.
So, Apple just seems to try to do things right most of the time, top to bottom.
I agree on that, and it certainly was nice of them to do that. I would point out, however, that Apple has a 14-day return policy. And so if he got it after the new iMacs came out and it was an old iMac, he could just take it to an Apple store and return it and get a different one. And Apple is probably well aware of that. In some sense, this is probably simpler than having to deal with all those returns.
At the same time, we both know companies that return policy or not would have shipped it out because, I don't want to detract from saying Apple. And Apple has almost always been great whenever I've gone to the Apple store with a problem. I can probably say, since I've owned mobile devices, I've probably gotten 3 or 4 of them replaced over the years for free that were out of warranty because they had some problem that was Apple's fault. And even though it was out of our warranty, they just said, we're going to give you a new one. So, that's how they operate. That's why we're both invested from an ecosystem standpoint as well as financially in a company like that. They do it right. They do it right. Well, we'll be back next time to cover more. I'm sure you have other things waiting. And if
I
not,
do, where are they?
if not, develop them before.
Can you see them? I don't see them.
I don't. Nah, never mind.
Okay, I thought I was keeping it under the desk, but apparently you can peek under there. I didn't know that. That's a pretty fancy camera you have there.
Well, it's that whole. What's the perspective in the iOS 7?
Yes, the parallax.
Parallax, thank you. The parallax I can get under the desk.
That's it.
Ted, it's great to have you back. Thanks so much.
Okay, we'll speak to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Folks, we'll have all the links in the show notes to everything that Ted and I have been talking about, of course, to everything that's going on with the MacVoices, and we hope to see you back here soon. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including Mac Voices, Mac Notables, the Mac Jury, and the Mac Voices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.